Hello everybody and welcome to Books with Ike. My name is Isaac and today I'm doing my very late July, August and probably also September wrap-up. It depends on how long the July and August wrap-up goes on. So I read 3 books in July, 2 books in August, and 7 books in September. And the first book I read in July was The Golden Tower by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare, the very last book in the Magisterium series. This series is about a boy called Callum Hunt, who is about to take the entrance exam to a magic school, and his father, who is a wizard, or a mage, or whatever they're called, sorcerer, I don't remember, who abandoned wizard society, has told him to try his very best to fail the entrance exam. And that's basically all I can say for the synopsis. I hated this book. I hated it a lot. I was really enjoying it up to a very specific point, and I think you can probably tell what that specific point is if you've read it and if you do read it in future. Because there is an addition to the lore, or the backstory, or whatever you want to call it, which is utterly pointless in every way. And after that, the book just becomes incredibly lazy. I can't explain what I mean by that, because it's spoilers, but basically the climax of this book is bad, is very bad, and where the series lands morally is just insane. The moral message of this book is bad. It's very bad. I can't explain why without spoilers, but honestly, this is one of the most morally confused series I have ever read. It just doesn't make any sense, and the romance is crap, and yeah, it was just the worst book in this series. It completely ruined the series overall because of things. There are no surprises, there are no twists, everything goes exactly as you expect it to, the characters are bland, nothing really of note is in this book, and I think the same is true of The Silver Mask. And I think after The Bronze Key, the writers just sort of gave up on this series, because I've read their other work, and their other work is good, so there is no excuse for this. I think they just wanted to be done with it, and maybe that's me being too harsh, maybe it's a middle grade series and I shouldn't be thinking about it this hard, but just no. Absolutely not. I gave this 2 stars, it ruined the series for me, it made me get rid of the series, I don't recommend reading it. However, the second book I read in July was Lair of Dreams by Libba Bray, and if you've been following my Goodreads, or are in any Discord servers I'm part of, you will know my feelings towards this series. This is the second book in the Diviners series. It is now one of my favourite series of all time. It is so good. It's perfection. I cannot properly express how much I love this series. So, I should give a synopsis. The Diviners is a YA supernatural horror set in 1920s America, and it follows a girl called Evie O'Neill, who is sent to stay with her uncle in New York after a scandal in her home state of Ohio. And in New York, a serial killer is just beginning his work, and Evie has a strange power that might be the key to stopping him. This book does not follow Evie as much, to be honest. This is more about Ling Chan, who is a Chinese-Irish daughter of immigrants living in Chinatown, and Henry Dubois, who was the heir to a rich Louisiana family. They're also my favourite characters in the series. As with the first book, this book is very slow-paced, and I do think that does detract from the story a bit. But, that being said, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, because this book just ramps up to the ending, and it is so good. The writing style is incredible, the atmosphere is incredible, the horror is terrifying, and not just the supernatural horror, the human horror. Because this series is about the injustices of society, basically, and this book in particular focuses a lot on the American dream and the failure of the American dream, And something this book just does so well is just all of the characters, every character who has any POV at all, not just the main characters, but any character, is always chasing the American dream, and the American dream is shut to them. They have no chance of ever achieving what they want, because of the societal injustices of the time. And obviously this isn't just commenting about the time, it's obviously also a commentary on our world. But, like, the way it, like, weaves the metaphor of the American dream into actual dreams is just so clever. Oh, I love this series so much! All of the characters are incredible. This one has my favourite character development in the series, I think? Yeah, I would say that. I'd say this one has my favourite character development in the series, especially for Evie. My romance problem with the first book is not present here. The romance in here is done so much better, and the romance in the rest of the series is done so much better. All of the themes are just so good. It tackles so many powerful topics like racism and governmental exploitation and workers' rights and, oh, just so many things. Homophobia as well. I will say that the plot of this book is very predictable. There is one major plot twist, which is just you see it coming from the moment it's mentioned. The moment the mystery is set up, you know what the answer is, really. Or at least I did. Yeah, it's one of the most emotional series I've ever read. It's extremely poignant. It has extremely sad moments and extremely joyful moments. This one is probably the darkest of the series, because this series actually does something different in that it starts all of the characters at their low point and steadily builds them up rather than breaking them towards the end. And I love that aspect of it as well. As I said, the character development in this is just incredible. All of the characters are just so well realised in this series, and I love them all, except the villains. The villains are some of the most terrible people that I've ever read about, because they're the American government. Yeah, they're the American government in the 1920s, so you know they're not going to be good. Oh, I forgot to talk about the main theme of this book. The main theme of this series is eugenics, and that is the motivation behind everything the bad guys do. Yeah, so it deals with eugenics and racism and classism and sexism and homophobia and human trafficking, drug use. It deals with loads of historical details, which are really well researched, it feels like, such as the Chinese Exclusion Act and things like that. But yeah, needless to say, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and I adored it, and it's one of my favourite books of the year. And then the last book I read in July was Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray, which is the third book in the Diviners series. Again, I loved this, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The character development and relationship development and the themes and the writing and everything about it was absolutely impeccable, except the pacing, again. I loved the first half of this book, and then the third quarter is a very sharp slowdown from the first half, but it brings it back by the end, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and I loved it. And the plot development is also incredible. The villain, ooh, I forgot to talk about one thing in Lair of Dreams. I'm going to be very chaotic in this video, because I need to be, right? So, the villain in Lair of Dreams is just, oh, the imagery in this series is so incredible, and the reason I'm going back onto that before talking about the villain is because there is one specific scene in this book, and I have never been more vividly able to picture a scene than something that happens in this book, and it is really eerie and creepy and terrifying, and it involves the main villain. This book is, I'd say, even darker than the first two, because it's set in an insane asylum for a lot of it, and it deals with stuff like medical malpractice and the mistreatment of mental patients in the 1920s. I forgot to mention the plot up until this point, but the plot development is also absolutely incredible. There is no aspect of this series that I don't like other than the occasional pacing issue, and the romance in the first book, but that was deliberate, I feel like. I feel like that was deliberate. Yeah, I love this, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The Diviners is one of my new favourite series, and the first book I read in August was The King of Crows by Libba Bray, the fourth and final book in the Diviners series, and I loved it so much as well. I cannot decide which of these three books is my favourite. It's not the first one, but all of these three are just so good. And lots of people were disappointed by this finale, and I can understand why, but I don't agree at all. This book groups up all of the characters in really different ways to the previous books, and so you get to see the group interacting in situations you wouldn't expect, and it's really good. It's really fun. I love it. Actually, I shouldn't use fun to describe the Diviners, because it is a horrible series. It's very, very depressing and dark and sad. But this book is much more lighthearted, and I think that's by design. That the first three books are all about injustice and dealing with injustice and how these characters' lives have been ruined by American society, and how American society has been ruined by American society. Whereas this book is all about marginalised people banding together to help each other, and I love it so much for that. And the ending is so well done. I think a lot of people would be disappointed by the ending, and that's fair if you were expecting something else, but I don't think I was. I wasn't expecting anything. I couldn't predict anything in this series. Well, that's not true. I predicted Lair of Dreams. But I could not have predicted how this series was going to end, and I think the final message of that ending is very important and poignant and relevant. And then there's the epilogue. And also, the thing about this book is that it, even more so than the first three books, it deliberately draws parallels between the 1920s and the current state of the world. It talks a lot about gun violence and the right to bear arms, a bit, I think. And of course it talks about racism and sexism and homophobia and everything about that. But yeah, I loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The Diviners is now one of my favourite series of all time. They're definitely going to be some of my favourite books of the year. I highly, highly, highly recommend them if you have not read them. They are so good. They are just absolutely incredible. I cannot articulate how good they are. You just need to read them. I know they're already quite popular, but they deserve to be more popular, because honestly, I think this is probably the best YA series I've ever read. I'd say it's the most sophisticated series of all that I've read, not just YA, of any series. It is just so well written and well realised, and it has incredible characters and incredible world building as well. I forgot to mention that up until this point. Incredible characters, incredible world building, incredible plot, incredible themes, just so well done. The most perfectly handled themes I've ever read. Just please read The Diviners. If you take nothing else away from me, take away the recommendation for this series. Yes, even over Skullduggery Pleasant. I like Skullduggery Pleasant more, but this is... everyone will like this. I promise that anyone who picks up this series will absolutely love it. I promise you. And the other book I read in August was Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan Maguire. This is also great. This is a YA portal fantasy novella series about children who go to fantasy worlds and what happens when they come back to Earth. And this book is set at Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children, which was set up by a woman called Eleanor West, who herself went through one of these doorways and decided to create a support network for other children who are deemed as having mental problems by society, or hallucinations, or false memories, or whatever it is. And this is about a girl called Nancy who has just been enrolled at the home, and it is also a murder mystery. And the murder mystery is the weakest element of the story. It's very obvious very early on who the killer is, but where this book shines is in the writing and the world building, because Sean Maguire is able to conjure up such vivid pictures of these worlds with so few words, and you can just clearly picture, like, every world that she talks about. And all of these worlds are so imaginative and fun, and I really want to see all of them, and I had hoped that that was what the Wayward Children series was about, but it isn't. I mean, it is. Obviously, it shows a lot of stories from the different worlds, but not the worlds that I wanted to see. But I'm sure I'll love the rest of the series as well. Aside from that, the characters are also great. You wouldn't think that you would be able to realise characters so well within such a short book, but she really manages it. They are so well done. By the end of this book, you really understand who everyone is, and all of their different tics and idiosyncrasies, and what they've been through, and it's just so well done. Like, this is a masterclass in concise writing, because you wouldn't think that characters or world building would be able to be fleshed out enough in such a short book, but they really are, and I love it for that. I have written a full review for this book, and I will leave a link to it in the description. So yeah, that was every book I read in July and August. I did film September in the same video, but it ended up being too long, so I'm gonna have to cut that video in half, and I'll have to do the September wrap-up in a different video. If you've read any of these books, I'd love to hear what you thought about them, so please leave that in the comments below. And also tell me what are some books that you've read, not necessarily in these months, but just recently. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter, or add me as a friend on Goodreads if you feel like it, links to both of those in the description. And I will have another video up soon. I'll hopefully upload my September wrap-up tomorrow. But until then, thank you for watching. I've been Isaac, and this has been Books with Ike. Goodbye.